I'm a mentor to a number of organizations. And what's very interesting, what I've learned is that many of those organizations create a technology and then wonder how to apply it to the world of business or the world of industry. Um, and the problem there really is it's a little bit like throwing something on the wall and hoping it will stick. The reality is that those people need to look through the other end of the telescope and actually to recognize what the business needs are or the societal needs are, and then create technologies which meet those needs, which meet those imperatives. And then you know that you have a very good fit between the technology development and the needs of business or society, and therefore the implementation story becomes much easier.
Hello and welcome to our very first episode of the piMonk series. I'm going to be your host for the day, and I'm going to be hosting a very special individual today who is an expert in the field of AI. Before starting the interview, I would like to introduce piMonk for you guys. piMonk brings ideas to life. We bring together experts from all over the globe who are exceptional personalities in the tech sphere. We aim to establish the piMonk series as your go-to hub for all things related to AI, machine learning, and deep tech as a whole. Let me now welcome today's guest, Mr. Tony. There's no explanation for the work you've done, like be it any industry from like supply chain to risk management. Like your work spans around more than 2 decades, if I'm not wrong, like going by your LinkedIn bio. And it was a long list, so it took me a while to just go through what you've done. And like, I mean, I've gone through a long list of what you've done in all the industries, be it insurance, supply chain, engineering, with your stints in like RSA and IBM. Now you've become a full-time author. I mean, I've known about your books lately, which is Analytics for Insurance, AI in the Future of Banking, which shows how renowned you are for your work in these fields and how much you emphasize on the quality and the implementation of AI in all these sectors. I mean, there are only few people who understand that the future will be in AI and the future is as we grow. And I think you, being from the start of the industry till now, you've evolved with the industry. So coming to my first question, which is a follow-up of this, which is being a huge part of the space, being a huge contributor to the space, what is your experience from then to now?
Well, firstly, thank you, Varun, for the very kind introduction. It's really been quite a journey. I started off as a structural engineer. That's what I studied at university, and they taught me how to build things. But actually, I was more interested in how they fell down. And I became very interested, therefore, in the insurance industry, because insurers normally have to compensate organizations when there are building collapses. With an engineering qualification, I then became qualified in the insurance industry. Insurance is very data-driven, and probably 20, maybe more than that, 25 years ago, I really got the data bug. I really wanted to understand how data can change process, how data can give us insight. So I was very much at the beginning of the data era. I spent some time in the insurance sector, but then decided to move to the technology sector, particularly in the North American marketplace. And it felt very strange. It felt like jumping off the top of a diving board into a swimming pool and not knowing how warm the water was or how deep the water was. But actually, I found that with my skills, I could swim, and I actually enjoyed the experience. So I started bringing different skills into the data environment. My career developed with the development of data and analytics, firstly from business intelligence, then to predictive analytics, then into rules-based prescription. And that naturally took me along the road towards AI. So I find myself now with a broad understanding of AI, but can I code? No, coding is for other people. My job is to try and join the dots and to try and help organizations and individuals recognize how advanced analytics and AI come together to start changing industries and professions.
Yeah, of course, it's quite evident with your work all over these companies which I've listed now that you've been a pioneer for like data and analytics, and which has gradually evolved into the emphasis of artificial intelligence coming into processing. So, like now, you've been realizing it since a long time, but the world has come to a realization now, and you're one of the few people, as I mentioned, who've realized this importance of how AI would be essential for future. For example, now there was a buzz about like Elon Musk saying that there are human robots coming in the near future, and like now there's a sign of like fear and like anxiety, anxiousness about how the world is going to look with automation in the future. So, what's your opinion on it?
Well, I think the first thing really, Baron, is people's opinions are heavily influenced by science fiction. So therefore, we picture the future from what we see, what we learn from Hollywood, and that's not necessarily the case. I think also that there is a lot of hype about the topic of AI. I think there is a lot of misdescription. AI is very much a buzzword, and many organizations and many individuals and many conferences need to have AI within their title or strategy to look as if they're part of the game. But the reality is that in many of those cases, the way that they are using data is nothing more than what we would call advanced analytics. And that kind of moves in the prediction prescription range, drifting perhaps into cognitive. The challenge also is that AI, again, is a very broad term. We think in terms of hard AI or soft AI. Hard AI effectively being when decisions can be made by a system without the end user, such as you and I, knowing that it's a computer or not. Or alternatively, soft AI is really a system or an approach where man and machine or human and machine work together, and the system provides insights which are not immediately obvious to the human.
Right.
I think it's kind of interesting also this whole issue of humanoid robots.
Yeah.
And again, there's so much to talk about that in terms of, do we want our future robotic solutions to look like us? Maybe we do, but why should that be? Perhaps because we would respond to them differently, we would interact with them differently. Again, it rather depends on the type of solution that individuals and organizations are looking for, and whether it matters whether that solution has 2 eyes, a nose, and 2 ears. At the end of the day, it will simply be an automated system.
Right. I mean, I totally agree with your point that it totally depends on what kind of solution a person, like a corporate or an individual, wants to implement. But like, I mean, all these fields, like which are like, for example, I'm based out of a marketing field, and nowadays I've seen like e-commerce channels, e-commerce portals using AI to read consumer behavior to get them to the websites and personalize the feed. And I know your background is in like insurance and finance, and I mean, I wanted to know your take on how would it change the financial industry or the insurance industry, like as you are an experienced individual in it and you've seen it all, done it all. So
almost kind of linking this question and the one immediately before as to whether we should feel threatened by AI. And I think the reality is that AI will affect almost all professions and almost all industries. And therefore, you have to think a little bit about what type of profession and what type of industry will be affected. So therefore, any profession or industry where there is a higher level of repetition or has the capability to automate will find that systems will replace human judgment. And that is quite natural, but I guess really not everybody will be affected. If you think of it in terms of a catenary, a chain, Those at one end of the chain with very low skills will always remain. They will always be in work. Those at the other end of the chain with very high advanced skills will always remain in work and will always be required. It's all the guys in the middle who will be primarily affected by this technology change.
Yeah.
And because there are so many people who are likely to be affected, then they are all stakeholders.
Right.
And therefore, they are entitled to a view to contribute to how this new world will look in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back then to your issue about the financial services sector,
Yeah.
a lot of financial services is process driven, and therefore it lends itself very heavily to systems replacing the human process person. So therefore banking will be affected, investment banking is used, AI and advanced analytics are used to be able to make predictions about finance. Retail banking, of course, increasingly takes on new characteristics, which it is learning from the retail sector, the white goods sector.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of change going on. One might also argue that even without AI, many of those changes possibly might happen. But actually, the reality is that the AI genie is now out of the bottle. And there is no way that we will actually put that AI genie back in the bottle. The genie is alive and kicking, and we will have to learn to live with him or it.
Yeah, I mean, you made a very interesting point there about the stakeholders, which would be the most affected, like one of the most affected people in the whole implementation thing, the process. So, like as I know, like as you've been in the industry for way much longer, and it's a very sensitive topic of ethics and the way they use and the responsibilities which the stakeholders have to carry with the new things they implement in the system and the processes, keeping in mind the society, the corporate culture, and the things which follow. So, I mean, I wanted to know what's your take on the ethics and the responsibilities which AI or automation would bring about with the stakeholders, especially.
Well, ethics is a really critical part of the mix.
Right.
We think in terms, obviously, of the technology and how that works, and what sits beneath the bonnet, and then we think in terms of the way in which that technology might be applied to the business or organization and how it will influence the business model. But with so many stakeholders, those stakeholders are a really critical component in the implementation of AI and advanced analytics. And therefore, not only do we need to be able to communicate with them in words which do not involve jargon, in ways which they can understand, but we also need to win their confidence insofar as that they need to be confident that automated decisions which are made do not carry any bias, that the data which is shared remains secure and is not misused, but also that organizations and governments take a responsible viewpoint towards that data, which of course is, at the end of the day, ultimately one of our most private things. So, I think if we lose the confidence of the stakeholders, as in fact we see where major corporations, such as airlines, whatever, have data leaks, and people get very anxious about that. If stakeholders lose confidence, then they will be less inclined to engage with the future. So it's not a question of will the future happen. The future, an AI infused future, will happen, but we can make it difficult for ourselves, or we can make it easier for ourselves. And the issue of ethics is fundamental to how easy or difficult we make. And ethics, of course, isn't an accidental thing. Ethics relates to the attitude of an organization, the AI implementation framework, for example, which might need to have ethics at its very heart. It might also relate to the degree of oversight within an organization, which would be or needs to be independent or has some degree of independence. It relates, of course, to the government approach, and it relates to regulation. So ethics is not an accidental byproduct of the AI transformation, but rather it rests at the very heart of what the future will look like.
Yeah, like I agree. Like ethics is actually like a byproduct of what processes and all these implementations come up with, and like it's very important, this very topic for us, because now we live in an era which would be clouded by AI, which would be clouded by automation, and who knows what's going to happen in the next 5 years. And you being in the industry for 20 years, you know that this, you must have seen a lot, like with the ethics and the responsibilities, guidelines changing with how AI has been evolving, right?
But when I try to look into the future, I'm not a fortune teller. I cannot predict the future.
Yeah.
But my view of the future is influenced by my experiences in the past.
Correct.
And actually, that isn't always a very good thing. So therefore, it may well be, for you guys to be in a better place to imagine what the future will be like, because you don't carry those prejudices. You don't worry about, we tried it last time and it didn't work, or we had a poor experience, therefore we're frightened of trying it again. Many of you younger men and women have a different attitude, which an older generation don't necessarily have. So, kind of the game is wide open. It's not just for grey-haired fellas like me.
Yeah, I mean, like I do know that there's a vast difference in the behavioral patterns and attitudes of people, but we keep your generation as a guideline, as a benchmark for setting standards ahead. And like, I wanted to know that what kind of skill sets would people like us would need to retool for the future. Like now you also, when you are transitioning from a non-data era to a data-oriented era, you must have reskilled yourself as per the needs. So, I mean, for us, it would lay way more emphasis to learn now rather than the future.
That's a really interesting question. I think the reality is that we can't know everything about everything.
Right.
And even if you look at a topic such as AI, there are so many elements within that subject. Some might say that AI might include palm recognition, or facial recognition, or speech recognition, and there are multiple different elements, and you can't expect to be an expert in everything. But you need to have an awareness of all those things, so that perhaps it's a little like a jigsaw puzzle. You have the ability to plug the pieces together, put the pieces together to create a picture. But in terms of kind of the skills going forward, this was a question or discussion I had with one of the business schools, and it was a group of university professors, and their concern was that they were teaching their graduates, undergraduates and postgraduates, in a way which was more suitable to 1950 than 2050. So they were teaching subjects, teaching the core subjects, and then adding a little technology on as a separate module. But they had to recognize, or they have to recognize, that it will completely, AI and analytics and data and all those things will completely infuse into everything we do, in terms of how we travel, in terms of how we bank, in terms of how we think about things, how we create things. So therefore, the skills which are really needed in the future are what might be called the soft skills, the ability to be agile, to be flexible, to be brave, because sometimes it's not always going to be turn out the way you want to. The ability to be prepared to take a risk, the ability to be prepared to fail. But before this call, I was thinking a little bit more about that topic, and I realized, in fact, that if you are a sportsman, many of the things that that you participate in a team sport reflects all those things. Your ability to move around the field, around the hockey field or whatever. Your ability to enjoy winning, but not be personally devastated by coming second or whatever. So, I thought that was an interesting issue. So, my view was moving away from hard technical skills, but also being able to understand the importance of softer skills. And then there's a final element too, which is very much around, with these hard and soft skills, where do you play? Where do you fit into the game? And my advice really is, find something that you're interested in. Find a business area that you're interested in, be it banking, be it retail, be it technology, be it marketing or whatever, and apply that combination of hard and soft skills into that particular area. And because you're already interested, that's where you will engage better and where you will start to make a really big difference.
Yeah, I mean, sure, like it's a blend of everything. Everything needs like reskilling, everything needs to change as per the era. And I mean, just to add on to the conversation we just had, like, I mean, when did you realize it's the moment that I need to like cope up with pace up with times? And when was that? Like, when did you realize this aspect?
Did I ever have a hallelujah moment where I said, this is what I have to do? At a personal level, I realized that if I only had one qualification, I could only really work in one particular market or in one particular profession. When I had two qualifications, engineering and insurance, that allowed me to work in both professions and made me more valuable as an individual. So therefore, I thought this is kind of kooky career move to be an engineer working in the financial services sector. And then I realized that actually, if I was going to communicate better with people, I would need to learn some communication skills, and that took me into the world of marketing. If I was going to learn about supply chain, if I was going to talk to supply chain experts, I really need to talk to them in the language which they understand, and not to be fobbed off with jargon. So for me, my career was an evolution, and many things happened, and I came to many crossroads, and I could have chosen to follow the straight road, but in fact, I kind of turned left or turned right, did something a little different, and therefore, for me, as I look back on that career, it's just been wonderful. But when I was 20 or 25 or whatever, if somebody would have said that I'd be talking to a young guy on the other side of the world about my experience of AI, I would have said, you got to be joking. But it's easy to look back and see what that journey was. So you have to kind of go with it. You have to go with the flow, and enjoy every step of the journey.
I think you've overcome your crossroads pretty well, and what a wonderful career it turned out to be. And now you've become an expert in the field, which is a demanding field, which would determine how the future would turn out to be. And it was a wonderful chat. It was a wonderful experience to talk to people like you who've been like mentors for us who are young upcoming techies, and technology is something which is always everywhere. Like even if we watch football now, you have the VAR and all the things. And I know as a Brit, you must have hated all these changes with football, and or you might have loved them. I don't know.
Technology is everywhere. We can't hide from it. But therefore, as individuals, we need to make sure that we're part of the game, rather than a spectator. If you think in terms of AI and advanced analytics being an express train, that train is taking everyone on a journey, and you can either be in the front carriage, you can even be the driver, or alternatively, you can stand on the platform and watch the train go by, and maybe wait for another one at some time in the future. What would you prefer to do? Would you want to be on the train, or do you want to be on the platform?
Yeah, of course, I would want to be on the train and not stand behind the platform. I would just want to ride the wave.
And the first part of being on that train is buying your ticket and even getting to the station. And that is the emotional moment that means, I want to be on that train. I want to be part of it. I want to contribute to the future. I don't want to be a victim of the future. I'm a stakeholder. I'm entitled to contribute to the future, and that's why that's how I see my role. My role is to encourage everybody to recognise that they are all a part of the future. They're all stakeholders, and not to be confused or intimidated by technologists who will talk in terms that the normal guy or woman won't understand, but rather for people to recognise what all this stuff means and the part that they as individuals have to play in the game.
Right, of course. Thank you, Tony. It was a wonderful chat. It was a wonderful experience talking to you.